It's almost 7 years now since I completed my term as Director General of IFPRI, and I've been watching you very carefully during those 7 years. And Joachim and all my colleagues and friends at IFPRI, congratulations. It's tremendous what you've done in this institution during those 7 years in terms of expanded activities, expanded output, and expanded impact. It was a period of time when it didn't really matter which newspaper I looked at, which news media I approached, or which book I picked up. There would be something based on IFPRI's work. That's incredible. Because yes, IFPRI is a wonderful institution, but it is a small player in the big scheme of things in terms of the money that's being spent. Yes, I know that Joachim has more than doubled the budget since I left 7 years ago, but he has probably tripled or quadrupled the impact, or maybe more. But still, to see IFPRI having the kind of impact it has had during those 7 years is just wonderful for somebody who can say, look, I was associated with this institution once. So congratulations to all of you for that. As Joachim mentioned, it's very important to generate knowledge so that we can help policymakers make enlightened decisions. But it is equally important that that knowledge, in fact, be embodied into the human capital, so that young people will take this knowledge, they will strengthen their analytical capabilities on the basis of the knowledge that's being created by IFPRI and elsewhere, so that they can influence policymakers. Because policymakers still need a lot of new knowledge. They need it in such a way that they can use it. It means it has to be relevant, it has to be timely. It has to be what they want to consider at that particular point in time. And that is why the creation of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge and, if you like, the creation of analytical capabilities among the advisors, the policymakers, the academicians, the researchers, those things have to go together. What I'm going to talk about today is one small piece of that, as Joachim pointed out, the piece that has to do with capacity strengthening in the area of food policy. Let me start out on a negative note. We're not going to achieve the Millennium Development Goals at the global level, we meaning the world. The world is not going to achieve the World Food Summit goal for halving hunger. The food crisis were poorly handled by a number of governments and to a lesser extent by some international institutions. The natural resource management is not sustainable at the global level, and it is not clear whether we are going to be able to deal effectively with climate change. So being at an academic institution where everybody grades everybody else, I grade the world with an F. Now this in spite of the tremendous impact that IFPRI has had. And the problem, of course, with these kinds of comparisons is what would be the counterfactual. If IFPRI hadn't existed, what would the situation have been? And as I mentioned earlier, the situation would have been considerably worse. A lot more governments would have made the wrong decisions. Can it get any worse than F? No, not really. So maybe a D- would be better. So that in fact it could have gotten a little worse in the absence of the work that IFPRI has been doing. What I'm trying to say here is that there is a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done if we are to achieve food security for everybody in the world, which presumably everybody in this room aspires to. So why is this? Well, one problem, of course, is that governments have different priorities. You can call this lack of political will, or if you want to be kind, limited political will. There are some other priorities that have to be dealt with first. They are at a higher ranking, higher order. Then, of course, many developing country governments would say, look, we just can't afford it. We just don't have the money. Well, that is a matter of priority. Every country has money, has resources that could be spent on the kinds of things that we're talking about here, namely improving the well-being of people. Then there is limited knowledge and limited analytical capability and lack of motivation. And those are the three things that I hope we can talk about today. Yeah, we can beat up on developing country governments because they have priorities that we disagree with, but that's not going to get us very far this afternoon. So hopefully we can talk about how do we reduce the limitations around analytical capability? How do we generate more analytical capability so that policies are made on the basis of verifiable evidence, if you like, a scientific approach to decision making? So in order to begin kind of thinking about how we at Cornell University, in collaboration with IFPRI and a couple of other universities which I'll mention later, how we could begin to have an impact on the strengthening of the analytical capability and therefore on the better policies. We said, look, the food system, of course, begins with resources, with land and water and sunshine, and it ends with what you put in your mouth, and that's the end of that. No, of course not. That's really not the way we ought to look at it. We ought to look at the food system as a dynamic behavioral system, which consists of a number of decision makers who can be influenced by governments and by non-governmental organizations, if you like, civil society, as well as the private sector. So you can, in fact, change the food system if you can convince these decision makers, whether they have to represent consumers, producers, market agents, and some of these other groups that I mentioned up there. And the way, of course, the government can do this is by the three different ways governments can influence the food system. One is by creating incentives or changing existing incentives. Secondly, by regulation. And third, by generating and making available knowledge. Those are basically the three things that governments can do to influence the food system. So that's kind of the foundation for the program that I'm going to talk about. Now, how do you proceed then? Because you've got bureaucracies and people do what they're told, or if they don't do what they're told, they probably don't have any power the next day. So how do you break this decision-making process wide open? Well, my opinion, and I think that's shared certainly by Suresh Babu and others who had worked in this area, is the social entrepreneur has a very important role to play. Now, what is a social entrepreneur? It is a person who is in the business to create, to expand social value, as opposed to a business entrepreneur who is in the business primarily for economic reasons. The social entrepreneur is in the business for social reasons. Call it a policy entrepreneur in this particular case, if you like. It's somebody who operates within or outside the public system. But somebody who, as we say as you say in Washington, since I'm no longer here, who thinks outside the box. Somebody who comes up with new innovative ideas and who is not afraid to try to get them implemented. Yes, some of these guys get fired because they don't really fit within the bureaucracy. That may be the cost that some of these social entrepreneurs have to pay. But they change agents, both whether it's within or outside. They try to innovate in the policy areas. And of course, whether you want to call it creating social value or you want to call it solving social problems, that may be more a matter of which words you use. The fact is that it's somebody who doesn't just kind of follow orders and doesn't really come up with new innovative ideas. So the next question then we faced was, is this relevant, is this social entrepreneurship program or approach relevant to university level training? Do these things have anything to do with each other? And I would argue that they have a lot to do with each other. Yes, some people are born social entrepreneurs. Most have to learn it. Even those who are born with the right kind of genes, if you like, would still have to be trained in order to be as effective as possible. So what we're trying to do in the program that I'm talking about here this afternoon is to create a mindset in the students. A mindset that has to do with innovation, with creation, and with application. Because remember, if you were to count the number of words that have been said in this world about doing away with hunger and poverty, you come up to a very large number. There is a huge amount of talk about this, and most of that talk is never translated into action. So what we're trying to do with the students is not just to have them think innovatively, but also to apply what they think would work. As part of that, we're trying to strengthen their analytical capability. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's suppose that I am against organic food. I have just decided I'm against organic food. And this is not very different from saying I belong to a certain religion. I don't really want to talk about this, thank you very much, because I probably don't have the evidence to back up my position, but I just know I'm against it, or maybe I'm for it. We're trying to get the students away from that kind of categorical thinking into an analytical approach, so they say, is organic food good or bad? For whom? Under what conditions would it be a good thing? What about genetic engineering? Can we combine that with organic food? Does that make any sense? Pros and cons. Analyze these things. And emotion is fine, because after all, malnutrition and many of the problems we're dealing with are very emotional. But if that's all you got, then of course you are likely to not really be a very effective person, participate in the debate, in the advice, and in decision making. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to tell the students, look, use verifiable evidence. Call it the scientific method or approach if you like, but bring the evidence to bear. And it may well be that the preconceived notion is what you end up with anyway. Fair enough. And it could also be that you have end up with a somewhat different result. Now, fair enough. So when a policymaker comes to you and says, look, I have this problem, could you help me find a policy solution? You say, it takes me 2 years to do a research project and then I'll be back in touch. 2 years from now, of course, the policymaker is no longer a policymaker. He's probably, who knows where he might be. In any case, it's no longer relevant, it's not timely. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do 2-year projects. It just means we have to foresee or try to handle what kind of knowledge is going to be needed 2 or 3 years into the future, then try to generate it, so that the people that we're training in this program have the evidence available to them when the policymaker calls. I usually start these courses, I just came back from Tanzania after having given a course over there. And I usually start this by saying, all right, you just got a call from the president's office. He or she has decided, in the case of Tanzania, it's a he's decided that he is going to design and implement a program that would eliminate vitamin A deficiency or iron deficiency anemia, whichever you want to use. This is hypothetical. And today is Monday, you got until Thursday, then you have to show up in the president's office, and the Minister of Health will be there, the Minister of Agriculture, certainly the Minister of Finance, and there will be some civil society representatives, and there will be others there, and you have 15 minutes to tell those guys what they should do. 15 minutes, you have 3 days to prepare. Now, that's hypothetical, right? What do you think, Amy? Not really. The only thing that's hypothetical about it is you have until Thursday, right? Because the other example I usually use, or I used it in Tanzania anyway, was, look, you've got food riots in the street. They're burning cars, they're smashing windows, they claim that food prices have tripled in the wherever they buy their food. You don't have it until Thursday, you have it until tomorrow morning. What should government do about this? You're going to spend all night reading IFPRI material and other material that provides the kind of knowledge that you need to advise to the best of your ability with whatever limited time you have, whatever limited resources, and whatever limited information. Do we normally teach our students at Cornell University this? No, we don't. We teach them how to do research, and then we say, you've got plenty of time to do that. But you've got to kind of get your hands into the pocket of Bill Gates, and so you have lots of money, and you have a 5-year project to do this. Sure, that's important, but that's not what this program is about. This program is about using that information that